appreciate that this amendment recognizes the importance of listening to local voices, but find it very rich as we are considering this legislation today because the Biden-Harris administration has ignored the voices of local officials and stakeholders in Wyoming. The amendment is unnecessary. We already know what state and local officials in Wyoming think of this RMP. This bill listens to them where the BLM has failed them. But don't take my word for it. Just listen to what the stakeholders targeted by this amendment have to say about the RMP. First off, Wyoming Governor Gordon said, quote, "Unfortunately, but not surprisingly, the final environmental impact statement for the proposed Rock Springs RMP does not meet Wyoming's expectations of durable multiple use of public lands," end quote. Sweetwater County Land Use Director Eric Bingham testified before this committee and said, quote, "I and other leaders in Sweetwater County vigorously oppose the draft Rock Springs Resource Management Plan because of the federal land use restrictions and special designations that will essentially eliminate multiple uses and constrain economic growth and activity necessary to maintain our quality of life in Sweetwater County and impact all Wyoming citizens," end quote. "It's like a slap in the face," said Sweetwater County Commissioner Taylor Jones about the final RMP, specifically about the designation of the ACECs. Representative Hageman has had multiple site visits in Wyoming and invited members on both sides of the dais to join her. If the sponsor of this amendment is truly concerned about the local voices in Rock Springs, I would encourage him to go on one of these site visits with her and hear their opposition to this RMP directly. The BLM simply paid lip service to this RMP. Unelected bureaucrats, as normal, executed a radical environmental agenda to restrict the use of public land. Local stakeholders in Wyoming have been working with the BLM since 2012 on this RMP. Adding an additional 90-day comment period is a mockery of the decades' worth of work they've put into the process, just to be shut out once the Biden-Harris administration took over. This amendment is also a bad faith gimmick. In this amendment, there is no timeline on when the Secretary of the Interior must initiate the 90-day public comment period, so the BLM could stall implementation of the bill to push its own agenda instead of collaborating with the people of Wyoming. Again, if my colleague from California wanted to ensure the voices of locals were being elevated, he would support Representative Hageman's bill. The underlying legislation would allow for more public comment and feedback because it would restart the entire RMP process. I urge my colleagues to vote against the Huffman Amendment and vote in favor of the Hageman A&S and the underlying bill, which will ensure all stakeholders are included and heard. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time. Is there further discussion on the amendment? If there's no further discussion on the amendment, the question on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Huffman, designated Huffman number 1. We will proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
The amendment, aye.
Those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been requested. Further proceedings on the amendment designated Huffman number 1 will be postponed. Pursuant to the markup notice, it is now in order to consider H.R. 6547, Colorado Energy Prosperity Act. Without objection, the Subcommittee on Federal Lands is discharged from further consideration of the bill. Without objection, the bill will be considered as read and open to amendment at any point. Does any member wish to be recognized for purposes of debate on the bill?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Boebert, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of my bill, the Colorado Energy Prosperity Act, that prohibits the Bureau of Land Management from taking any action to finalize, implement, or enforce the BLM's proposed resource management plan and final supplemental environmental impact statement for the Colorado River Valley Field Office and Grand Junction Field Office resource management plans. This proposed land grab locks up 1.6 million acres of public lands and closes 1.9 million acres of federal mineral estate in Colorado from future oil and gas leasing. This bureaucratic handout to Green New Deal extremists also establishes 9 different areas of critical environmental concern on over 100,000 acres of BLM land. If this misguided proposal is finalized, thousands of jobs will be killed, access to American energy resources will be denied, our country will become more dependent on foreign energy sources, and this anti-energy land grab could cause gas prices to further increase. Colorado's Piceance Basin holds about 66.3 trillion cubic feet of gas. If Democrats actually cared about reducing emissions and the environment, they would embrace responsible oil and gas production in America instead of trying to put these industries out of business entirely. During Biden-Harris's first week in office, the national average for gas was $2.39 per gallon, while gas prices have conveniently dropped as we get closer to this election, kind of like they did in the midterm election when we drained our strategic petroleum reserves in the name of an election and not an emergency. The national average is still way too high at $3.22 per gallon as of this morning. America makes the cleanest energy in the world. And in fact, our natural gas is 42% cleaner than Russian natural gas. American innovation has allowed America to be the global leader in reducing emissions since the year 2000. And it's far past time that we stop begging our adversaries for more oil, for more production, and putting these dictators in a position where they're going to produce oil and gas for America. We have the highest standards in the world and produce these resources safer and cleaner than any other country. Let's responsibly develop American energy and stop pandering to national extreme enviro groups that don't care about our local communities. And again, if we are going to talk about climate, if we are going to talk about being efficient and responsible, then this is the direction that we need to go. Our coal-fired energy plants in Colorado are being shut down even at a faster rate than was proposed. And so we need to lean to natural gas and oil production more than we had in the past. We hear a lot in this committee about electric vehicles and green new energy, wind and solar. Well, if we're really concerned about carbon emissions, we need to start with managing our forests because we know that these wildfires emit more carbon emissions than all of the vehicles running in a single state for an entire year, according to NASA. But we have got to have clean energy that pairs with it. I'm tired of begging OPEC, and I'm ready to rely once again on the American roughneck. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Gentlelady yields back. Is there further discussion on the bill? Ms. Kamlager-Dove, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I oppose H.R. 6547. This bill would prevent the Secretary of the Interior from being able to finalize, implement, administer, or enforce the updated Resource Management Plan and Supplemental Environmental Impact Statement for the BLM lands managed by the Colorado River Valley Field Office and Grand Junction Field Office in western Colorado. There is no value to this bill. The updated resource management plans in question here are the result of a court order requiring the Bureau of Land Management to include an assessment of alternatives where leasing was restricted in areas with low potential for development. And that's precisely what BLM did. In the updated RMP and supplemental EIS, BLM says that the oil and gas industry cannot lease areas with no or low potential for development, medium potential areas that are surrounded by low potential areas, and some areas in specific need of protection, often areas that community flagged worthwhile to preserve and protect. Lots of areas. Ultimately, the oil and gas industry can continue business as usual on the vast majority of land that is actually of interest to them. I will reiterate that these RMPs restrict leasing only in areas without high potential for oil and gas development or significant resource conflicts. We've heard our colleagues across the aisle argue that BLM used bad data in this determination. Let me assure you that is misleading, to say the least. Although data from USGS's 2016 and 2018 petroleum assessments show increased estimates of oil and gas reserves in certain areas of the region, these areas have not been targeted for drilling for at least 6 years, even though we've known they might contain more oil. And again, 85% of the region that oil and gas industry is actually interested in is still open to oil and gas development. Over 700,000 acres are still wide open for business. There is nothing anti-energy about this administration either. We're producing more oil and gas than ever before, more than any country in the world. I am confident that the oil and gas industry will be just fine without access to these lands, which they'd likely never seen develop and would just use to pad their portfolios as a demonstration of their so-called dominance to investors. This bill's only result would be to provide yet another giveaway to big oil, which has had the upper hand on our public lands for far too long. And if anyone is curious about rising gas prices, just ask those big oil executives to stop colluding with OPEC. And if you want more information, we had a roundtable on it just yesterday. It is long past time for more public engagement, conservation, and renewable energy, not less. I oppose this bill and yield back.
Is there further discussion on the bill? Representative Carl,
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to give my time to Congressman Boebert.
go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Carl, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I struggle to hear that there's no value in this bill when we have many stakeholders who are locals who have expressed their appreciation for this bill. Of course, there are a bunch of blue counties that get donations from Sierra Club and are going around to claim that they support these actions proposed by the BLM bureaucrats. But if you talk to the actual people on the ground, they extremely oppose this Biden-Harris land grab. Garfield County Commissioner Tom Jankowski says Garfield County, Colorado is home to the Piceance Basin, which has the second largest natural gas reserves in the U.S. And he says, I appreciate Rep. Boebert's attention to oil and gas drilling on federal lands. The natural gas reserves from our region are an important resource for our county and geopolitically. Chelsea Mira, executive director of the West Slope Colorado Oil and Gas Association that represents Roughnecks in Western Colorado, said the hardworking women and men in Western Colorado's oil and natural gas industry take pride in producing reliable, affordable, and safe natural gas as oil for our neighbors, Americans, and allies. It is crucial to consider the taxes and revenues paid by our industry, which fund important rural fire protection districts, library districts, rural schools, tourism projects, and much more. As a primary employer, creating 2 or 3 jobs in the economy for every job in our industry, we are thankful to contribute to a diversified economy for Western Colorado, despite BLM's alternatives presenting a false choice, suggesting that either recreation or oil and gas are mutually exclusive on public lands. The Western Slope has shown that we can utilize our public lands with all multiple uses thriving together for the betterment of our communities. At the hearing on my bill that we had here in the House Natural Resources Committee, Kathleen Sagama, president of the Western Energy Alliance, testified in strong support, stating the extent of the current proposed land closures and restrictions is at an unprecedented level, with the ultimate effect being a ban on leasing. In large parts of the federal mineral estate, local communities rely on responsible oil and gas production from public lands for economic prosperity and job creation. Oil and natural gas development in this area has shaped the cultural and societal fabric of the community and supports a robust economy. Now, as I stated previously, Americans make the cleanest energy in the world. Our natural gas is 42% cleaner than Russian gas. American innovation has allowed America to be the global leader in reducing emissions since the year 2000. If we kill oil and gas in America, the world will become more reliant on much dirtier resources that are developed in China and India. All those job-killing anti-energy mandates being implemented in the US don't matter, as China is laughing at us and continuing to increase their coal production and consumption at a staggering pace. Once China's new coal plants come online, China will be using 76% of the global total for coal. America already has the most stringent standards and requirements in the world in place for oil and gas producers that reduce environmental cultural impacts. BLM is proposing to close all areas with no known low or moderate oil and gas development potential, and is basing its analysis of the oil and gas potential on out-of-date information that does not take into consideration modern technology. This proposed land grab is nothing short of partisan politics meant to further restrict access to the oil and natural gas development that could reinvigorate the economy of the West Slope of Colorado and help ensure that energy security is available for all Americans. Rogue bureaucrats at the BLM shouldn't be unilaterally locking up more land in Colorado, and it's urgent that we block this overreach and prioritize responsible energy production. Mr. Chair, I yield.
Yield, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Carl yields. Is there further discussion on the bill? Hearing none, it is now in order to consider amendments to H.R. 6547. I recognize the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, for the purpose of offering an amendment in the nature of a substitute designated Boebert 339. Without objection, the amendment is considered as read and open to amendment at any point. Representative Boebert, you're recognized.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would just reiterate that I urge strong adoption for the bill, H.R. 6547. This is important to stop the proposed land grab that locks up 1.6 million acres of public lands and closes 1.9 million acres of federal mineral estate in Colorado from future oil and gas leasing. This bureaucratic handout to the Green New Deal extremists also establishes 9 different areas of critical environmental concern on over 100,000 acres of BLM land. So I'm here to advocate for the responsible development of American energy and stop the pandering to the extremists who are trying to regulate our communities into poverty. I've seen this firsthand in Colorado through the regulations that have been put in place both at a state level and at a federal level, where it's harder to get permitting, it's harder to get leasing. We have the land grabs where we're no longer able to produce energy as we should in areas. Those high-paying jobs are being driven out of Colorado. Families are being separated as members of the family have to work out of state. It's very hard when both families are both parents in a home are forced to have jobs and even second jobs to supplement the income that is lost. So I am urging adoption of my bill that blocks this Biden-Harris land grab that will kill thousands more jobs in Colorado. And Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Is there further discussion on the amendment? If there's no further discussion on the amendment, it is now in order to consider amendments to the ANS to H.R. 6547. No additional amendments, the bill or the ANS have been filed. Are there any further amendments? Hearing none, the question is on the amendment in the nature of a substitute offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. Boebert, designated Boebert 339 ANS. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of a substitute is adopted. I move that the Committee on Natural Resources favorably report H.R. 6547 as amended to the House. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no.